Once you've had a relationship, the same with the person, you know, you can bring a person to mind and we can connect across time and space. And that's the same thing with the plants and with the remedies. We have many tools with which to work, but in its purest form, we have that direct perception, that direct communication.
Hello, thank you for joining us this week. In this waxing of the Virgo new moon, and with this new month starting, back to school and all, the theme for this month in Presence Collective is Rituals for Wellbeing. We're sharing a workbook to create daily practices that connect you deeper to yourself and the earth, as well as guided meditations to start and end the day. You also get the book club, the community, and last month's meditation course. You can join us by clicking on courses on our website, www.thefutureisbeautiful.co. Thank you as ever to our patrons. We're hoping this month to cover our core costs, which means we need 50 of you to donate £10 a month or 100 of you to donate £5 a month. Being a patron also means you can join our monthly video calls and our chat group and get to connect with other patrons around the world. You can do this by visiting the community page on our website. If you feel called to join me in either of these ways, you are so welcome. It's really the best part of this, to get to know you through community and sharing together. I had an idea that it'd be really nice to share more of your creativity on the show. So if you have poems or songs connected to the themes in the podcast, send us a recording and we can feature it at the end of the show. Our email address is connect@thefutureisbeautiful.co. For this week, I want to share something written by a friend of mine, Magda Prochner. She actually died suddenly a couple of weeks ago. She was a very bright soul, a yoga teacher, and a lover of life. This was actually the very last post that she shared on her social media. Excuse the language, but I feel like she had this urgent message for us, and she wanted more and more of us to hear it. This is in dedication to her spirit and the truth and love that she carries. Instead of using the whole F word, I'll just say F, but you know what I mean. It's called Wake the F Up. There is something that happens to the human when they put a cage around their soul. They ignore their own internal guidance from that whispering voice that knows exactly what is needed, what to do and how to do it. They find themselves going in the opposite direction to the one they know they need to go. They imprison their senses so that fun is wrong, pleasure is wrong, easy is wrong, flow is wrong. They become rooted and attached to a life of struggle. Their language highlights a harsh reality. They focus on every cloud in an otherwise blue sky. You are born into this space and time to live. You are born to be alive. This may sound obvious to say, but some of you forget. The fact is, if you're not choosing life, you're choosing death. Every time you kill what you yearn to say, kill what you yearn to do, kill what you yearn to experience, kill all the opportunities where you yearn to love, it becomes a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Life just seeps and seeps and seeps out of you. F that. If this is you, if this is your life, effing stop it. Do not die because you don't have the courage to grab life by the balls and truly live. What a ridiculous way to go out. I mean it. Effing stop it right now. You have a voice and you're here to use it. Even if the things that you yearn to say seem hard, you need to get them off your chest. Find the way and say them. Free the spirit that is clammed up in your heart and your pulse. You have ambitions and things you feel called to do. Do them. Your soul came here to express itself. Untangle your thoughts from fear of judgment from others, fear of looking like a fool, fear of not succeeding. Who the F cares? Even if it doesn't turn out perfectly, you will learn a lesson of some sort. You will be better for having done it. And at worst, you get to laugh at the ludicrous absurdity later on. You are here to be you. Stop asking every effing Tom, Dick and Harry who you're supposed to be. How the F are they supposed to know? Do they have your soul? Have they lived in your shoes? Do they have your experience? Do they have your life plan? Wake the F up It's an insult to the divinity housed within you when you go searching for lead from others, while your own soul is offering you gold. Yes, there's a lot of swearing here, but we have to jolt you. It's time to effing wake up. Your presences and appreciation of who you are is fully needed right now. Thank you, Magda. Rest in power. Another message that I want to share with you this week is from Rayoni, chief of the indigenous Brazilian Kayapo people. He's been in the UK after the G7 summit. This is the closing part of a piece he wrote for The Guardian. You can read the full article on our show notes. Talking about the destruction of the rainforest, he says, "So why do you do this? We can see that it is so that some of you can get a great deal of money. In the Kayapo language, we call your money piu kaprim, sad leaves, because it is a dead and useless thing, and it brings only harm and sadness. When your money comes into our communities, it often causes big problems, driving our people apart, and we can see that it does the same in your cities, where what you call rich people live isolated from everyone else, afraid that other people will come to take their piu kaprin away from them. Meanwhile, other people starve or live in misery because they don't have enough money to get food for themselves and their children. But those rich people will die, as we all will die. And when their spirits are separated from their bodies, their spirits will be sad and they will suffer. Because while they are alive, they have made so many other people suffer instead of helping them, instead of making sure that everyone else has enough to eat before they feed themselves, which is our way, the way of the Kayapo, the way of indigenous people. You have to change the way you live because you are lost. You have lost your way. Where you are going is only the way of destruction and of death. To live, you must respect the world, the trees, the plants, the animals, the rivers, and even the very earth itself. Because all of these things have spirits. All of these things are spirits. And without the spirits, the earth will die. The rain will stop. And the food plants will wither and die too. We all breathe this one air. We all drink the same water. We live on this one planet. We need to protect the earth. If we don't, the big winds will come and destroy the forest. Then you will feel the fear that we feel. Just giving some moments for that to land. 2 huge wake-up calls. As it happens, our conversation today is about joining the dots between plants, planets, and people. We answer the question, how can we rebuild our relationship with plant life? My guest is Jemma Foster. She's a forager, chef, mixologist, and practitioner of plant and vibrational medicine. She shows us how we can all develop a stronger relationship with the plants that we live amongst and all of nature, even if we live in the city. She is the founder of Mama Xanadu, which is a multidisciplinary botanical and culinary studio offering wild mixology, supper clubs, creative workshops, and consultancy. She weaves together her deep study and her beautiful intuitive eye to create very special experiences that clearly open up new ways of looking at nature, the cosmos, and ourselves. She is currently writing and illustrating a book on sacred geometry. I hope that you enjoy this conversation and it brings to life nature inside of you. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community, or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. Jemma, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you onto the show, The Future is Beautiful, and to be sat here on your boat on the canal in Hackney, where we are certainly part of the ecosystem of this part of the city. And right now there's a boat coming past along the canal, and there will be cars and there will be dogs, and there probably will be people walking past as well.
And some swans.
Exactly. So thank you for having me here on the boat.
You're very welcome.
I want to start with this notion of alchemy, which is a word that many people will have heard, but maybe not really know exactly what it means. Can you share your understanding of what alchemy means?
So alchemy is working really very archetypally. So when you talk about working with metals and the alchemical gold, it's the archetypal energetics around that rather than working necessarily on a physical level. Always it's about transmutation, transformation of something from the physical realm into spirit to be transformed into its highest potency, into its quintessence, we call it, and then brought back down into the physical realm. So it's spiritualization of matter, really, is the ultimate goal. And we have the three separate elements, the three principles, which is mercury, sulfur, and salt. So sulfur is the soul. It's the source. It's the individual, the higher self, the individual soul. And that manifests, it's fire and air. So that manifests as willpower, it's thought, it's the igniting force. And you think about sulfur, it's that sort of that yellow flame. And then from that, you have mercury, which is like the bridge between worlds. It's the spirit, it's consciousness. It's mutable, so it's air and it's water. And it kind of dances between the non-physical, the sulfur, the soul, and the physical, which is salt, which is the earth and water. So how that manifests in when you're working with plants, the mercury is the alcohol. It's the spirit. That's why we call it spirits, and that's working with the volatile sulfur, which is the first thing that is lifted, the essential oils. And then you have the alcohol, and then you have the actual plant matter and the minerals, the salts that are left. So you're working with these three, exalting them to their sort of highest potential, and then unifying them again. So you have a complete remedy, which is working on body, spirit, and soul.
So that's very sort of specific about creating a remedy. Is that always what alchemy is?
No, it doesn't have to be. That's when you're working on a physical level, but alchemy also doesn't need to be in the physical realm because you're working so much with the planets. It's about timing. It's working with the energetics of the plants, of the people, of everything in our physical reality, and it's working with the planets. So looking with astrology as to what's going on. Each plant has its own astrological makeup. So you're working with particular times to pick the plants. But you can also be working, you can think of, you go on Vipassana, that's an alchemical process. Any kind of transformation on that level is an alchemical process.
So then any kind of spiritual activity is alchemical?
You could see it that way. If it's working to, I keep thinking the spiritualization of matter, which you look at a lot of esoteric law, is essentially why we're here, what we're trying to do. It's one thing to pursue advancement or spiritual practice, but it's another thing to integrate it into physical reality, which is why it's so important when we go on these paths and we take this as spiritual adventure, that we spend the time to really kind of anchor it and ground it and integrate it into our reality.
Can you share a bit more about that? Like, I understand what you mean, but it's a lot of big words and maybe newer words for people. And so I wonder if you can explain, like, maybe through an example, like what that actually looks and feels like.
Well, something perhaps that you see with, say, with plant medicine, like with ayahuasca, is that people might have this sort of experience which is happening on, they can happen on quite a sort of cosmic level. They can, be really kind of outside of their body and have an experience, and then coming back in takes time. Landing takes time. In the same way when we're sort of incarnating into our bodies, over the years, like it's something that takes time, and if it's not treated that way, and if you kind of perhaps go back and you're taking more practices in before the integration process, then the energetic body can be kind of fractured. Like we need to sort of distill these processes into our waking reality. That makes sense.
Yeah, of course. It makes complete sense. I couldn't agree more.
And I think that there can be a danger to bypass that, because the sort of seeking the heightened experiences, when the integration part is perhaps not as kaleidoscope.
Yeah. It's not as lit.
But the thing is that we do exist in this physical reality, which is as through esoteric lore and also through quantum physics. We know that the physical reality we see is just the sort of end result of energy, but it is still our reality, and it is still, we need to honor that by anchoring in these energies into the physical body, into the physical world.
Can you explain that a little bit more as well? Because you said, as we know from quantum physics, and I don't know if everyone listening does know.
No, of course. I mean, so when we were at school, and, still being taught in school, is that, you look at an atom and it is matter, solid, hard as nails, that's it. And what spiritual texts have always talked about is how this is Maya, it's the illusion, it's not this isn't reality in the way that we consider it to be. And we never had the quantum lens that we could basically look at really, really tiny things. And now we do, and we can look at an atom and we just go through. I think at the moment it keeps changing, but it's accepted that 99.9 to the 13th % of an atom is empty space, which is, when we say empty space, it's very potent space. It's that the void of everything and nothingness at the same time that we talk about in, many Buddhist and other Vedic texts. But it's two physicists who worked out that if you took 1 cubic meter of this, then of that, and that potential energy that could boil all of the Earth's oceans. So it's, they know that it's this pure, potent energy. It's definitely not nothing. But, we yet to sort of figure out ways in which to access it.
This energy is inside the table.
Yeah, so you think that everything, like you, I, everything has a frequency. Everything matters essentially, like an interface pattern of energy that's vibrating at such a point that it's creating this illusion of this physical reality. The level of which it vibrates is the frequency. So everything, what we're sitting on has its own frequency. There's a lot of molecules bumbling around inside at a rapid rate. So it just creates that. Even this, like the green in the plant.
This is the plant, yeah.
Yeah. It's only green because it absorbs all the other colours and it reflects the green light. So it's just, when you start to break down what we think of as being this really solid reality, and you see that it's really the last stage of an energetic process that's constantly morphing in and out of reality, then we start to begin to see how we can work better with energy. Because everything is all energy.
And so how have you been working with energy in this way and with this understanding?
Well, I sort of began in a slightly sort of back to front way, because I was working as a journalist, and I was writing and I was researching, and I got really into these ideas of sort of multiverse and quantum theory and and then I was speaking about some of these sort of themes within it, and was told to go and see this Dr. Yuba actually became my teacher, because he was teaching about all of these things. What in a way was almost a byproduct of it, because I just wanted to know how the universe works instead.
Just that.
It's a program you're training to work with energy, with healing, with transformation, with vibrational remedies. So it's homeopathy, shamanic homeopathy is working with medical astrology, so I went straight in and, was out of, very much not working with the physical reality for quite a long time, and working with sound. And so I started on the vibrational aspect, and then I talking about this integration and spiritualization of matter, I then realized I needed to anchor it into the sort of real physical world. And also with plants, like when you're working with homeopathy, it's just a Latin name. You don't really, because it's capturing the energy of the plant, the sort of energetic signature. In some ways, with flower essences, I wanted to be able to see and recognize what that plant was, and to have a relationship with it in nature. So then that led me down the sort of working with training in herbal medicine, and with like flower essences and essential oils and naturopathy and foraging and food. And it all kind of, I guess the end point of working directly with nature and working with wild plants is the culmination of all of that. It's working on the energetic and the physical. So it kind of all eventually came together into this thing that's now Wild Alchemy, or Mama Xanadu.
And if you can share like an example. So for example, if somebody was going to come and have a meal prepared by you on this very boat, what would be the backstory of that meal? So
first of all, I draw the astrological chart for the day. For that, I would then prescribe a series of blends of flower and crystal essences. So they'll be attuned to sort of remedying some of the things that are going on in the planets at the time, and how we might need assistance in specific areas. And I will kind of create the blends and then summarize what it's sort of hoping to achieve. Because with the flower and crystal essences, it's like they're just providing you with the support and the foundations for you to make the shift, rather than being the shift. For now, we're just entering into the Virgo new moon, so we would look at that and about kind of getting, basically once you get all your shit together. So with the astrological elixirs, I then create a drink which would be based on what's seasonable and what's out there, and I'll maybe also work with energetics with that. Like I will either myself with the energy that I will put into that, or through sound, or through the vibrational remedies. There's also, once with their drink, they can then fork the drink with the tuning forks. So I have all the planetary ones. The ones here are the sun, earth, moon, Mercury. So I've got the 4 elements.
Would you like to play them and bring their sounds and their frequencies in?
Let's start with earth, because in honor of Virgo moon, we'll go earth and water. So water obviously represents the moon, Virgo is an earth sign. So this is the sound of earth. And the moon. And to the Sunfire. And then Mercury is air. Yeah.
And so you'll bring these frequencies into the drinks that you're preparing?
Yeah, but it's a playful thing. It's for people to play around with it. With the essences, there'll be 6 in the little test tube rack, and I'll invite people to be quite intuitive with it and to tune into what they feel that they need and what they need to work with. And the same with the tuning forks. But what's quite interesting is you often find it depends on their own astrological chart and their own makeup. As to some people will really love the earth. When you find out their charts or earth or an earth sign, or they'll be repelled by the fire because they've got no fire in their chart. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of the food, and I will bring, whilst I'm preparing the food, I'll work with the energy, with charging it through various means, whether it's me or it's the tuning forks or the essences.
Can you say a bit more about that? I really want our listeners to get a feel of what they can do and how they can bring this into their lives.
So, I mean,
if it's
you look like a bit of a mad woman, but you basically, I mean, I will think about the way that I stir food. So, sometimes when I'm working with food that I haven't, so obviously if I'm picking something, I have the direct connection with it. Even when things have been passed through just various hands, there's a sort of energetic sort of trace. So often I will do 3 anti-clockwise to remove any, and this also is particularly important if you're working with any kind of mass-produced food or any sort of anything that's come from
supermarket, pretty much.
Yeah, anything from, because it's come through many hands and you don't know necessarily how those people have been treated. You don't know, in terms of the chemicals and all the different preservatives and processes that have gone through that. So I just try and remove any sort of negative vibration that way. And then I'll just put in the good vibes with 3 clockwise. I'll also do, if you have the Reiki attunements or if you have whatever the thing with, although I'm a Reiki master, I don't consider it that. I play around with all kinds of symbols. I think, and even if you've not, haven't had the Reiki attunements, you can still work with the Reiki energy. It's just the energy that is in everything, and it's in all of us. So it's about the intention. So you're just asking that intention to come in. You can work with sacred geometry. You can work with drawing with your hand. You can draw certain shapes. Spirals are great. Just spiraling something out and spiraling something in, so you can really kind of just be intuitive and play with it. It's like everyone has that ability within them and they have the energetics within them, whether or not they've had a specific training. So, and
a lot of it is just about pouring your love into what you're
making. So much is the intention. It's just coming from the heart.
I've definitely had that experience of, if you're making food for yourself and you're feeling a bit lazy and you just kind of slap it around, or if you're making food and you're kind of a bit nervous and distracted somehow and it can come out a bit rubbish. But for me, if I'm making food for someone that I love, my family or my partner, or it's or for friends for a celebration, and I'm really taking that time in the kitchen and I'm maybe dancing around a bit, got some music on I like, maybe I'll sing a mantra to the food, but stirring with that precision of just sort of feeling how that food's going to be enjoyed. Yeah, and I've had fun as well, in more community scenarios where you kind of invite everyone to come in and stir some wishes and intentions and for the community into the food, and it's a really nice way of bringing life to it.
Definitely. And I think also the flip side of that too is if you're not having a great day, that you can just be take me out of this. I'm just, I'm keeping out of this. I'm trusting that all the other energies are going to take over and sort of imbue within that. You can work with the elementals in that way. And I think it's just feeling into it. It's just having that conscious awareness.
And then your food becomes medicine. And especially if you've had a bad day, you can kind of make yourself some medicine.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like the opposite of kind of just microwaving a ready meal.
Yeah.
And then that often, like, if I don't know, like, I haven't had a microwave personally for years, but when I was like in my 20s and I worked quite stressful kind of, you know, early 20s, and I had quite a stressful job and would work really long hours, and then I'd grab like a ready meal like on the way home and then might sit in front of the TV with it, and it would just help that like feeling really stressed and tired kind of vibe, and it would sort of add almost more fuel to that vibe,
because you're lowering your vibration to match with that.
Yeah, and so it's a really nice reminder that you can, wherever your vibration's at, whatever you're feeling, you can choose to kind of to increase it with the way that you think about your food and the way that you attend to your food.
Yeah, just that we can all be kitchen alchemists. That's the thing is at the moment that with a lot of our food, the way it's produced is when they've measured the different frequencies of food and people, there's a range within the human body, sort of from like 30 to 80. In different parts of your body of different frequencies. And then at 25 is the sort of the death state. So that's when disease patterns have the fruiting grounds for disease patterns. And that's what the vibration, most of the food that we're getting from the supermarket is. Like it's you get this a lot with, I think also being wary with things like with supplements too, when it's just one half of the picture. So on a physical level, you might have your microwave meal and it's got, you know, X, 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 and X in it in terms of its nutritional value, but energetically it's energetically dead to a certain extent. It's to trying to strike that balance. They did an experiment with coffee with a couple of subjects where they gave them the coffee to hold, and it lowered their overall vibration, and took 3 days to sort of raise it back up. And this is what, you know, would happen a lot of the time when we have to match or we have to meet the vibration of what we're putting into us. And then they did the same when they actually drank the coffee. So obviously the vibration lowered, and then they gave them frankincense. So frankincense and rose are the two highest known frequencies, which are 320, all measured in hertz. So that within 20 minutes, because they're transcellular, so they'll go throughout your entire body within 20 minutes. Yeah, brought the vibration back up to what their normal vibration was within that amount of time. So there is an element of it's not possible for everybody to, you know, live this pure world and then not go to the supermarkets and grow all their own food and pick everything. So it's just about damage limitation. You just do what you can. So, you know, if you can start to work the energy with your food in the kitchen, if you can start to work with other plants and high vibrational remedies, flower essences, essentials, you just sort of bring that into your sphere, then you're working to transform the energetics.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but I just wanted to ask what your perspective was on this. That when I, like, say, go to temples in India, prasad, which is, you know, it's the food as blessing, it's normally sweets, and Indian sweets very high white sugar content. But actually it's also evolved over the years to like packets of like biscuits, and you'll go into the temple and there'll just be like all these packets of biscuits, and the Swami will be blessing them. And then, you know, you'll be encouraged to eat them because they're prasad, they contain this blessing. Do you feel like we can bring life into dead food through our intention?
Yeah. Yes. And that's what's happening with that. Someone could be having a very, very kind of strict diet, feeling, you know, and they'll be on their phone and they'll be in a state of anxiety because they've, hasn't measured measuring the food, and, is this good for me? Is this not good for me? It's just, there can be a lot of anxiety and sort of paranoia around eating the right things. And, particularly when you go into that extreme purism, it's almost like your body is also in that state of anxiety. It's not able to receive, it's not able to land those nutrients on a right level either. So the other side of that would be, having something that's sweet and delicious, and the joy that it gives you, the sheer pleasure is that's the healing in itself. So it's, if something is going to give you pleasure, then you're shifting the energetics within that. So there is it's a balance. But yeah, I was thinking that recently I get like a veg box, and they give you the sort of dodgy old fruit they give away to everyone. And coupled with the crab apples are out in the local, there's a community orchard. And so I just been making apple crumble and plum crumble, whatever's going crumble. It's such a pure, simple, the joy of like picking the fruit and then, creating the crumble and then eating it. There's such a sort of pleasure with that even though some people would consider it sort of, it's an indulgence, but it's just pure joy.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gone through different stages of like cutting out lots of things and then realizing how sometimes that can be really helpful, and then other times that can, like you said, create like an anxiety or almost like a fear of the world, because the world is messy and like wild, and there are all these other frequencies constantly going around. And another thing I've played with is noticing that if I'm in like a retreat center and I'm doing physical practice, spiritual practices and physical practices and meditative practices, and I don't have any other responsibilities, worldly responsibilities, then I can use my food to like help me access higher states. But when I come to London and I've got lots of responsibilities and I've got to navigate my way around the city, that if I am too pure about the food that I put into my body, then it can make being in London feel really uncomfortable and really intense. And that there's actually also a nice thing of like, making sure that I am more relaxed so that I can feel more relaxed in the city, like with my food. But it's always a balance. You can take any of these perspectives way too far.
Yeah, it's just watching it within yourself. It's watching when, that sheer joy becomes greed and overindulgence, or when that pure alignment with your body, with yourself, becomes constrictive and actually causes pain. So it's definitely just having that awareness.
Beautiful. So can you share a bit more about how the oils, the essential oils and the essences, and being connected more to the high frequencies of plants can open up something else inside of us? So you started to share about it, and I wonder if you can give a few more examples.
Yeah, so it's almost like all the doors are going into the same place. It's just like different ways of going in it. So the flower essences are working on like the mental door. So they're working really well with our limiting belief systems, our patterns. So it helps to kind of sort of ease the reins on that so that we can figure out where we're going, kind of thing. So it holds space really for that. The essential oils are working on that sort of more emotional body. And so that's the door that you're kind of working with, and then it will open up into the others. So you can work with plants energetically. I mean, when you traditionally make a flower essence, you're working with water memory to retain the energetic signature of that plant, and then you're holding the energetic picture of that plant to your body. Your body recognizes it because it's an electromagnetic. It has its own frequency. We have a frequency. The plant has a frequency, and that's our language of communication. So you're working on healing on that level. But equally, you just go and sit next to that plant and you're bathing in its frequency. So you're also able to have a direct experience with the plant. And we have these other methods to be able to tune into the plants on physical, mental, and emotional degrees anywhere that we are. So there's also bringing that awareness into the food you eat too. So it's not just the nutritional value, but also the energetic properties that it has. It's like they're like a package of infinite potential. And it's about the intention and how you guide and direct that as to what you're wanting to work with the plant on.
Beautiful. I found essential oils to be really useful and incredible to work with, and either just having one or two oils that I know that I can breathe in certain moments and it will just kind of help to center something back in me, or will open up a doorway in to just change frequency. And I also love to do anointing rituals where I use like a series of oils to go through a transformative process, and with each oil have a different activity, so you kind of open up another space in your inner world, like as you go through the oils, and it's really powerful what they bring.
Yeah, I mean that's on an alchemical level, when you talk about they're called essential oils, like it's that soul essence. They're very strong to work with. But yeah, I tend to carry around rose and frankincense, because then no matter what else is going on, you know that like you're always going to be able to counteract the vibration.
They are two of my favorites as well. Yeah, it's funny actually seeing how me and various friends, like our kind of travel medical kit is now just a pack of essential oils. And that when you get into it, you really do realize like how an oil can help with a headache, or if you burn yourself, like how an oil can help with that. And it allows you to just connect a little bit deeper, both to nature, but also to your own nature. So you kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's made me sort of learn how a different oil might help a different type of headache, for example, or something like that.
And the relationships with each person too, I think that's really crucial with all of these. That's a very strong element with homeopathy, that you're looking at one plant. What works for me is not necessarily going to work for you, even though we both have the same disease. It's about building those relationships. Like I find, like I have a very strong relationship with mugwort, and often I just need to tune into, visualize mugwort, just tune into the energy of it, that will sort of solve the issue before having to actually make a tea or do anything else with it. So because it's out in the collective, when you have a relationship, The same with the person, you can bring a person to mind, and that's why we always, we seem to know before someone calls us or whatever, that we can connect across time and space. And that's the same thing with the plants. So, and with the remedies, we have many tools with which to work, but in its purest form, we have that direct perception, that direct communication.
Amazing. I like to play with like alchemizing with alcohol as well. Like when I don't drink much alcohol, but if I do, like, or sometimes I'll go out and everyone will be drinking red wine and I won't actually want to drink it. So I'll smell it, and through smelling it like very deeply and tuning into the energy of it, it's like I can connect to the energy of the wine and join in with the conversation on the same frequency that everyone's in. And then of course I haven't actually drank the wine, so I can let it go when I walk out of the restaurant. And that's a really fun thing to play with for me. And also even with alcohol, sometimes I've noticed that you can, it's not about quantity. It's so much about like your state, how you're feeling, and how you alchemize the alcohol like in your body. I just use alcohol as an example because it's so much more palpable than we're talking about a crumble or something that you don't feel the effects of in such a intense way. But I've noticed that like if I'm feeling a certain way, like 1 or 2 drinks, I can feel quite drunk and like maybe, you know, a little bit kind of low. But then I could also drink maybe 5 times as much as that and not really feel drunk and feel on quite a high vibration, depending on like my relationship with that drink in that moment. And if you know what I mean, it's more interesting to experience experientially than to talk about. But it's made me really interested in this idea of how much impact, power, connection, however you want to explain it, that we have with everything that's in our life, and especially everything that goes into our bodies.
Well, I think with alcohol as well, it's that sort of, it can be quite a useful, again, it's intention, but it can be quite a heart opener. My teacher said that, you know, the first glass is opens a heart, second glass falls into ignorance. So, you know, and the Romans, when that was really when the kind of ego forces were the strongest, you know, they would drink wine out of amethyst glasses, because they call it amethyst as the sobriety stone. So they would it was quite a useful way of revealing the ego in order to work with it. But, you know, there's a tipping point, because often you can feel things come up to the surface to be addressed, and it's catching it in that moment, being like, oh, that's what's going on, before slipping into ignorance. Mm-hmm. The way that you were talking about tuning into the wine, or tuning into whatever it is that you want to tune into, it's just that, it's having that consciousness of what you choose to tune into and what you choose not to. Because we're being bombarded all the time with so much, particularly in London, in an urban environment. It's all about discernment, really, of knowing. And you find that when you're very kind of aligned with yourself, with source, you automatically seem to bring resonance from certain places. And you find, you know, when this dissonance starts to appear, it's because something's gone awry, you know. So it's how you navigate that energetic path on a daily basis, because we're all very close to each other, and we're all in our own fields. We're all kind of merging. It's this whole, you know, this biofeedback loop, or whatever is coming in. Like, what are you bringing into your field, and what are you putting out to be received by someone else? So it's interesting to play with that sometimes, to see the idea of it and to feel into it.
And so if we go back to your dinner, you have worked with the food before you bring it out, and you've brought the flower essences and the oils that are part of the drinks. Mm-hmm. And then what happens?
And then, well, there's another little part. So I have these little glass boxes, and I pick often what's going into the meal. Sometimes it would just a little sample of edibles. So from, you know, leaves and flowers and berries and things that people can explore in a kind of full sensory experience. And, you know, sometimes it's interesting, people just smell. Sometimes people just feel. Sometimes people eat everything. Sometimes people don't touch anything. You know, it's just to get a visual idea of what, and in its purest state, what's going into the food, and also where it's come from. Having that experience of the raw ingredient, because it's something that, like we were talking about with the supermarket, it's very rare, like that has only been through, I picked it, I've washed it, it's gone to them. So it's a very direct relationship they're having. And I've done sometimes with people who have, you know, I mean, it's entirely foraged, and people are always amazed at how full they get on not that much, because the energetics of the food, like it's not, and on a physical level, it's very nutritionally dense, because that plant has chosen to grow in that place. It's chosen the perfect conditions for it. It's chosen to be there. No one's forced it to be there. It hasn't been made to grow on land that has diminished minerals, that's been over farmed. hasn't been through however many hands before it gets to you. And so it really kind of packs a punch in many ways. So it's interesting to really kind of feel that vibration when you just eat. Like, it just, I encourage people to, if you know what you're picking, but just, picking something, from a tree, it's so unrecognizable to an apple that you pick up in the supermarket. It's really that aliveness is there.
Absolutely. I mean, what are the kind of things that we can forage, even in an urban environment?
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot of things that even in an urban environment. I think, aside from avoiding busy roads and avoiding places where dogs go, and it's interesting, I've seen the soil samples for some of the places like Hackney Marshes and Clissold Park and places like that, which are actually rather good. And there's this people can be a bit put off by the idea of urban foraging because we live in a very polluted environment. But equally, you go to the countryside and there's a lot of spraying on the farms, so it's very difficult to sort of know whether something is covered in pesticides or not too. So you always have to, again, this discernment of tuning into knowing on a mental level of where you are and what the situation might be, and also tuning into the energetics of it. And what I found really interesting is in places that you would think would have a negative influence to the growth of the plant, instead have, there's burdock that grows in such abundance, like right underneath a massive telephone post. The same when I lived down in Lisson Grove by this huge electrical power station, and the plants were just thriving. And they've done tests where, because mushrooms, which, I mean, they're all, I think all plants are alchemists, but mushrooms are really like the real alchemists. They soak up oils, they soak up heavy metals, and so you would assume that when you analyze those mushrooms that they've retained all of that, and they find that it's just magically disappeared. It's like they managed to transform it from one thing to another thing. Like it's kind of magic. So I think we have a lot to learn from plants. And I think when you see the plants that are thriving in an urban environment, that there's something about how they're managing to thrive that we can learn from. And by tuning in and by ingesting them and tuning into that vibration, that we're learning from them how to thrive.
Beautiful. It comes into my mind this image from the mythology of Shiva, where there's this moment where this toxic blue gas comes up out of the ocean and everyone gets scared. Actually, in this moment there are various gods and demons around, and they're churning the Milky Ocean looking for radiance. And when this gas comes up, everyone doesn't know what to do, and Shiva just pulls it all into his throat, and his throat turns blue. And then he holds it there, and then he releases it, and it turns into the gift of mantra, the gift of sacred sound. But it's like this power of taking something and transforming it into something else. Mm-hmm. And I like that it doesn't go all the way down into the stomach. It's almost like just pull it in a little bit, and then you can give it out as something else. And I think that's a really nice part to remember with all of this around energy, that there's nothing to be scared of. That we don't have to be scared about the fact that the vibration of the supermarket food is low, or scared about the vibrations of the city. And
otherwise people don't leave the house, or they don't, or they don't eat because they're so sort of paranoid. I think I just encourage people to spend some time trying to play with the energy and try and feel into it. And once you start to build up those relationships with the plants, and you start to really kind of feel also how instant that can be, how instant healing can be, and how something how it can change. If you ever make a flower essence, then, which you don't need to, the traditional way is quite laborious, and you have to, the buck or batch, there's the remedies where they would take a glass bowl and you would cut the flower and you rest it, and you'd have to on the surface, and you'd have to sit there for 4 hours and no shadow, your shadow nor the sun's shadow can pass, so you have to start all over again. But in reality, you can go out there and you find a plant that wants to work with you. You have your water, and that energy jump can be almost instantaneous. Sometimes it takes some time, but it can happen in a second, and it can happen. The remedies that you make in the sun are very different from the remedies you make in the moon, but they're all equally valid. But when you see what happens to the water, like it is like suddenly the light inside it just sort of becomes alive. You can witness that. And you can feel that happening when you work with food as well. Like if something is of a lower vibration and you work to shift it, you can feel it yourself. The way it will taste different. It feels different, it looks different. So it's important not to take any of this on a theoretical basis. You actually have to really, experience it.
And I definitely experienced that, even, taking 10, 20 seconds at the start of a meal to place your hands over your food and tune in with gratitude of where the food's come from, and also to kind of charge up the food. And it does make a difference to how that food tastes and how it feels when it hits your body. And I think that's one of the simplest ways that anyone can experiment with this principle.
Yeah, I think also when you do that it sort of opens you're also signaling to every cell in your body that you are ready to receive. So you're opening yourself up to be in a better position to receive the nutritional value from the food too.
Hello, this is Amisha. We are just taking a little break from the conversation here. On behalf of myself and the team, I want to say thank you for being part of creating a beautiful future. We make this for you so that we will all have the vision, wisdom, and activism we need at this time to weave a new narrative. Can you help us with this? You can do that by making a monthly donation to the podcast to cover our costs. Just the equivalent of a fair trade banana you might eat or a chai latte you might drink whilst you listen to this will make a huge difference to us. Head to www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community to become a monthly patron. And the other thing is to tell your friends about this podcast so they can tune in too. Send them a message or post on social media and let them know what you love about it. And whilst you're at it, leave us a review. And now, back to the conversation. Thank you for your loving beauty. So we have here this plant from your studio, and you have an amazing device that can help us to actually hear the plant. Can you share a little bit about this, and then can we see if this plant wants to talk to us?
So for a visual, this is a Calathea mosaica or Calathea network plant, which has these sort of really beautiful leaves. So the machine works on a similar way to a lie detector test. So with the polygrapher, you're working on measuring the galvanic skin response of the plant, of the skin. And with this, we're measuring the two leaves. And then that will go into a box called a MIDI sprout, which is a MIDI code. And then that goes into a synthesizer. And this was created by these two musicians in LA. There's also The Secret Life of Plants, that in that book, it's where the inspiration was the story of this guy who was just messing around one evening, and he hooked up his plant to the polygrapher and realized that it was having quite a human response. And then he thought about how to sort of get a reaction out of it. So he dipped a leaf in hot coffee, and then he thought about burning it. And then before he even got to the matches next door, it had reacted as if he'd actually done it. This led on into a lifetime of work of plant consciousness and communication and all that sort of thing. But this is the inspiration for it.
It's amazing, the notion that a plant, and we know this because we know that nature's alive, but it can be easy as a human to become a bit cynical about all of these things, and plants can become decorative in a house or in an office rather than alive, communicating beings in that space. And you know, and we know, like, okay, you can get this plant to help with electromagnetic fields, or you can get this plant that's like good to have in the bedroom because it does a certain property, like, you know, and others aren't, and all of these different things that you can kind of find like lists of the top rated NASA plants for air purification. But this idea that they are listening, and that if you even just think about doing something unkind, that the plant is having a reaction to that, it's quite something. And then you think, well, then what's happening for us humans? Because often you think, well, you know, you realize it's not about what people say or do always. Like, you can feel kind of that energetic intention, and that can be, you know, a really wonderfully opening, loving thing, or it can also be something that's quite upsetting and you can feel it. And so then it's like, okay, how can we be more aware? Of course, we don't have to be perfect and happy and well-intentioned all the time because we're humans, but the quicker that we can kind of catch and be aware of what we're sending out.
Yeah, I think if you know, when a plant is put into a sort of toxic environment, or, you know, they can be thriving when the vibrations are good. I find sometimes in times of trauma, the plants will get sick because they're tuning into that frequency. They're very sort of entrained with you, and that's what happens when you work with a plant or with flower essence. There's a point when you become entrained with the electromagnetic field of the plant and your electromagnetic field, and where they meet is where there's this potential for transformation. But this is a very real, tangible way of understanding or feeling into, in the same way with the tuning forks. They, you know, you're tuning into the frequency. And actually, again, with, as mentioned, NASA, they have the made from the frequencies of the planets, which is what these forks are tuned to. They made music, super eerie. But I think with anyone who is skeptical, there's a whole now field of plant neurobiology. And there's Stefan Mancuso's one of the Brilliant Greens, one of the books that he wrote. And he's sort of pioneered the field of plant neurobiology. And he's like, we know that plants can smell, they can taste, they can experience, like all of what we consider to be, you know, our primary physical senses, but they don't have ears or nose or any of the things that we believe is necessary to do those things. The Monica Gagliano, she did an experiment with Mimosa pudica, which is very sensitive, and she did this thing where she dropped it from a height, caught it in a net, and the first time it closed, because it closes its leaves very tightly when there's any sort of movement near it. They call it like the shy plant, and it closed. And the first 2 times that she did it, and then after that, she didn't. The plant stopped reacting. And then, which implies there's a memory recall. And then she left it for weeks afterwards and found that even a couple of months after, the plant didn't react because it knew what her game was. So it has the ability for memory. There's also some of the things that were kind of ridiculed at the time in the Secret Life of Plants. I think it was in the 80s, and then they made a film documentary that Stevie Wonder did the soundtrack for. And totally slammed at the time, and then now you've got people at Harvard and Stanford who are doing experiments that are backing it up. And one of them was plant hearing. Various brassicas, they release mustard gas when they're attacked by caterpillars, and they played the cabbage plants the sound of caterpillars munching, and that was enough for them to release the brassicas.
Wow.
The brassicas to release the mustard gas.
Yeah.
So that is extraordinary. Like, so these experiments are happening when we're understanding how, of course, and there's a mycorrhizal network and the research that's done into that of how we share information through the fungal network, how plants, can hear, can they see in a different electromagnetic spectrum than we do, but they're still able to see, to some extent, light. So it's a really interesting moment of time that there's so much research being done that is supporting what we kind of know on a experiential basis. So this is, there you are.
This plant sounds happy that we're sharing more about the amazingness of plants.
Yes. It's interesting. There is a slight urgency within it that wasn't there before when we played it at the beginning.
That's true.
I've worked with trees that have been in a sort of felling area, and plants that have rotten roots, and then all different young plants, old plants. Everyone has its own signature. But it's interesting, you begin to hear the subtle sort of nuances and understanding like what the plant is trying to communicate, because it's a universal language, even though each plant has a different accent, say, but they all use the same sort of expression. And there are people who use, I think it's easier if you're just using one instrument sort of synthesizer, like a harmonica or something that's or piano. And people working with the plant to train the plant to essentially play the instrument, play the synthesizer.
Mm-hmm. I like that you shared that the guys that created this, that they, when they were away, that they could tell how well their plants were being looked after through the sounds.
Oh yeah, so there's a thing. So they're called Data Garden. And they have I think they've got this cheese plant in their apartment in LA, and that's the plant that plays, so Plant FM 24/7 is beaming out the sounds of that plant. I mean, you look at it, it's surrounded by all these other plants, but it's the real, like, the diva of all of them. And when they go away and someone plants it, they can tell how the plant's doing from the people who are there might think it's been watered just fine, but they can tell that it's not quite right.
And maybe it's also the energetic connection between that person and the plants as well.
I mean, I take this one with me for workshops, and it's quite interesting when I go into a space, not always want to play. Especially if you sort of had to go through central London, suddenly we're in like a busy bar sort of scenario, and then just not up for playing.
And maybe after being on the tube as well.
And I did a series of events, and I left a plant overnight, and was not, the next day I was not wanting to engage.
Wow.
And then with a group of people, you find when people are all arriving, there's one thing going on. And then when we all sit around and we just tune in and meditate a little while with the plant, it then starts, when the frequency of its environment changes, its frequency changes, which is a really clear and quite explanatory way of what happens to all of us. How we work with our environments, why we sit. Someone in a bad mood gets off their seat on the tube and we sit on it straight away, and then we don't feel so good. And in the same way, we go out into nature, and we can, all our anxieties or whatever woes can be unraveled.
She likes that, the plan. She's saying, yes, go out into nature.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's also because each plant is connected to nature. I mean, as we all are, but you know, if it's difficult to get to nature, then just at least fill your house with plants, because you can work with them that way.
Yeah, and you can find plants as well that even if you don't feel like you're green-fingered, will work with you.
Yeah. But I think that's a really interesting exercise that sometimes with workshops that I will get a bunch of anonymous plants that are slightly obscure so people don't know what they are. And then I ask them to just hang out with the plant for a week or so and try and work out what the plant maybe can offer or what it's doing, or, you know, you can get a feel for the medicine of the plant. And it might be different for each person because it might be what it can work with you on specifically. And then I'll tell them what the plant is after they've had their own chance to experience the plant and try and tune into it. But watering your plants at the same time every week, all the plants, they're all different. They all have their own way of being. So if you can begin to just feel into the plant, like I'll be walking past the plant and suddenly think, oh, I've got to water you, because the plant's communicating that. Or, you know, like this one was sitting on my desk and suddenly I was like, I found myself moving it into the light. So I had a day in the light before it goes back onto where it was. So the more you are open to that electromagnetic exchange of information and the current becomes clear, then you start to be much more receptive. And then you don't kill your plants because they're going to tell you before you get to that point that they need this, this and this.
Mm-hmm.
It's only because we don't listen that we kill the plants.
Listening comes up a lot on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a huge part of building a real reciprocal relationship with nature. Is that ability to listen to nature and not just to kind of pillage and use nature as you know, somehow has become a somewhat dominant ideology in our world.
Yeah. I think if people... Yeah, you agree? I think if we could have... It's just about like the respect that you can't not have from nature when you really sort of turn up within it. And I think there's also something about... that I've thought about more recently with survival and with the knowledge that, particularly because of the density of the wild foods, you need very little to survive on. To have that discovery of knowing that I could survive with nature, that nature always has my back, no matter what happens, the end of the world, like there's still, I know that nature will support me. And that is humbling, but it's also, I have so much respect for nature. You can't not. And I think that's what I like to introduce to people, even on a theoretical level, and they're not necessarily going to go and forage. It's just the idea that this abundance that nature offers and the support that it offers and the fact that it's always never not there. It's always an invitation for you to go to it. That in itself makes you just change the way you think about how much you're impacting on it, how much destruction that there can be through the simplest of actions. So that in itself is often enough just to change people's consciousness a little bit to how they navigate their world.
it's always like, you know, in these sort of conversations about what's going to happen in the future, and this sort of image of stockpiling canned food as you know,
Yeah.
to make sure that you're going to be okay. and actually that supermarkets prepare for it as well when there's certain like scary bits of news coming out, that more people will stockpile.
Well, that creates the stockpiling. It's just the scaremongering. Like it's, yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. It's interesting that people's, as predominant consumers, you know, the first thing is to just buy more stuff and hoard more stuff, but rather than think like, so I mean, loo roll is one of the things. Loo roll is the thing that is entirely produced outside of the UK, for example. So that's one of these big stockpiling things. But, you know, lots of countries in the world don't use loo roll. You know, they wash instead. It's like there's lots of other ways to work around things. Like it's just being, you know, stockpiling cans. Like, yes, think about maybe, you know, drying mushrooms is something, or drying foods, or, you know, there's lots of other ways of working with it. But
can you share, this is sort of where I was getting to, if you could share some of the UK based food that we might not even realise exists on our doorstep?
Well, I mean, historically, things like rose hips. We basically the Second World War, that kind of got everyone through because they're so high in vitamin C, and everyone was sent out picking. You had to go and pick them and send them off to the sailors to stop them getting scurvy. So there was actually a pamphlet that went out with what to pick. Nettles. I mean, people were surviving on nettle soup for a long time. So there's an abundance of safe foods that people can pick and that we would be able to resort to in times of crises.
And ants?
And the ants is now the
foraging superfood.
Well, yeah, looking at other ways of finding protein that's less, you know, that's more available and less damaging to the environment. So yes, in the UK we have ants. I mean, that's the only thing that's sort of really made it into the mainstream.
I wouldn't say it's in the mainstream yet.
No, I guess
in the foraging mainstream, maybe.
I guess so, yeah. But I mean, I guess, well, it's a thing, I guess, you know, it's sort of, and you get, you know, cricket flour and stuff that's not indigenous, but yeah, I think it's interesting to think about new ways. And there's a company that's in, I feel like they're in Germany, but they basically create using light, water and sort of bacteria, that they're creating a plant protein. So there's a lot of research into how we can be less destructive. And things, yeah, like with plants, and that nutrient dense aspect, it's the same. We can find more things that are just, it's like distilling, it's refining. I think that seems to be there's a common theme at the moment with everything, with the chaos that's going on, is like we need to shed, have less stuff, refine, distill. You know, it's coming to that essence, and in a way the kind of crisis is calling us deeper into ourselves, and finding ways that we can use what's on our doorstep.
I love that idea of the call to our essence.
Yeah, our essence and our quintessence, which is the sort of exaltation of that essence in alchemy. I think there's always been a desire for the exotic too. You find a lot of these superfoods and things that coming from a million miles away. In the same with people with plant medicines, and we have all of this. We have a very strong shamanic roots. Unfortunately, we burnt many of our wise women, and we have a lot of brilliant plant medicines that are indigenous to the land, and we have an abundance of superfoods. It's just I think across all cultures, when we seem to have lost it, quite dramatically, is just to look nearby, look for things that are close, look for, we don't need to have pineapples shipped in from all over the world. We become used to that. It's also our makeup too, like this cold, damp environment of England. We don't want to be having watermelons at Christmas, because it's that yin cold damp matching the yin cold damp. But instead, like, nature provides us naturally with root vegetables and yang foods to counteract our environment, and vice versa in the summer. So we've just kind of become totally out of sync, whereas our ancestors would have been working directly with the seasons and things like, we have this issue with gluten now, but in the past, you would harvest in September in the autumn, and you'd have grain to last you through the winter, but then that was it until the following harvest. You were having everything for a short period of time for the season, and then you'd move on to the next thing, which is also when you're working with wild foods. It's like they come and go so quickly. You're constantly changing. And our bodies, we're not meant to be having the same thing all year round. We have to adapt to our environment. But we become so disconnected from it that we don't really necessarily think like that. We can have anything we want whenever we want it, in theory. And that's what we've become accustomed to.
And very quickly as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, there are listeners all over the world. Our community is very global for this show. And every single country has its own indigenous plants and its own medicine. And yet there are these global trends. So everyone's on avocados and maca and spirulina. And then that causes huge problems in the places where those come from. It's even with the Palo Santo thing that's happening with everyone using Palo Santo to smudge and clear spaces wherever they are in the world, and then that's causing huge problems.
Well, that smudge stick hanging upside down is made of mugwort, which is everywhere. It's very prolific, and it's incredible at clearing spaces. So that's again, there's always an alternative. We become so accustomed to excess. So it's so extreme that we have to sort of completely mine to death one thing, and we have to completely utilize, one thing until then something else replaces it. There's no sort of balance.
I think a lot of it is about, at least on the personal level, is more about education. I don't think that on that level, we're all obsessed with this idea of excess, but because everything is given and is available, and you start to learn about space clearing, or you go to a yoga studio and you see the teacher wafting around something, and then they tell you it's Palo Santo, and then you go and buy it, and it's not you wouldn't think to say oh, well, what is that, and what's the purpose of it, and how do I find something local that can do that? You think, oh, it's that I need. And just this mixing of cultures and mixing of all traditions that we have going on. I've decided that in a yoga space, I'm not going to use or let any co-teachers ever use Palo Santo, for example, because I'm like, well, we're opening up a yoga space. So either we use something indigenous to where we are, or we use something indigenous to the Indian yogic culture. At least that makes sense, even though it's the same issues of importing something. But I think it's just that we don't really necessarily know how to... I think we've just got a bit confused about just... It's quite a logical thought process, like the simplifying. But somehow it's not how our brains have been taught to work.
Yeah, well, because we've been programmed to be consumers. So there's an element of resourcefulness in thinking, you know, I can go out and pick mugwort because it's just right out there, rather than going and buying Palo Santo, for example. So, but there is, I guess, a sort of cultural disease, which is that we need to have these things. We need to go and buy these things. We need to, which is how advertising works. So we're programmed that we need more stuff.
Totally. And I've noticed as well that I've had to kind of retrain something in myself from being a bit suspicious about things that come directly from nature, like food, and actually being more trusting of what I can buy off a shelf. And it doesn't make any sense, but yet I notice sometimes that reaction has come up where I've almost felt a bit suspicious of something that somebody, maybe not so much now, but occasionally, probably still, but definitely I remember this like some years ago, that you get so trained, like, this is what a carrot looks like, this is what a tomato looks like, this is what an apple looks like, that when you see a real one,
a wonky one
that's wonky, that's got different colour tones, it's almost like, ooh. and it happens very subconsciously. I think that's the thing.
This sort of idea that everything has to be perfect, and that if it's not perfect, something's wrong and you need to fix it. Whereas there's beauty in the imperfections.
So just to land us back in our dinner on the boat.
Yeah. Dinner.
Was there anything else?
We'll play the plant, and we'll play around with the tuning forks, the elixirs. We'll have the tasting menu, and then within that, and I'll talk about where things are from and talk about some of the mythology, because I find that really helps for me, because I love the storytelling aspect of it. So I think it helps to anchor a plant within someone's consciousness if there's an interesting story about it. So we'll talk about some of the mythology and the traditional uses for food and medicine. And then at the end, we might do a little like tea ceremony, depends what's going on at the time. Yeah.
And so these experiences are about providing a space for whoever comes to experience a deeper connection with plants, with nature, and with themselves.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for them to tune into themselves as to what they need, which will happen with the elixirs and with the tuning forks, and then just to open them up to the abundance of nature and the fact that, you know, when I picked the boxes, to know that it was like within 5 minutes of here, all of these things are being picked. You know, that just consciously being aware of how I think people think of nature as being in, you know, it's not here, it's in a park, or it's over there, it's in the countryside, or no, it's literally everywhere.
It's in another country.
Like, and I just feel like I have so much immense sort of admiration when you see like a little pineapple weed kind of breaking through the cracks in the pavement, you know, that they're so resilient and resourceful and quite incredible. So when people leave, I just would like them to be able to just open their eyes and walk a bit more than when they came, so that they're walking down the street and they notice that plant breaking through the concrete, or they recognize something, or they feel more held by nature because of this understanding of where these things have come from, and maybe tasting things that they've never heard of before, never knew existed, and didn't know what they looked like, or, you know, or the mythology, whatever it is that they take away with them that connects them to nature in some way, whether it's on a physical level for the food they ate, or on a mental, emotional level, that it shifts their, having listened to this plant, you know, that they go home and then they think about their plants at home. You know, they look at it differently, they feel it differently, and that in itself opens them up to receive from nature in a new way. So ideally, and also the planetary connection too. You know, I think people have a general understanding of how the planets impact us, but just to have, we're so kind of concerned with this realm that we often don't really think about how the planets are impacting us on a day-to-day basis. So, and that's really the alchemical process. It's the connecting the two, the earthy realm and the cosmic realm.
So people, planets and plants.
Yeah. So if people can leave a little bit of that, then that's what I love.
Beautiful. Thank you for what you're doing, Gemma, and you do it with such like care and grace, and you know, I've had an essence that we made last time I came here, and I've just been really enjoying using it, and I hope that everyone that's in London can come and experience, although I know that your way of doing it is small, so that we don't over pillage and over forage, rather than kind of mass. So maybe not everyone will get to experience it, but that this conversation really opens up that possibility for each of our friends listening to pay more attention to what's around them, and find out more about what they can eat and how they can work with plants in their lives.
Yeah, there are so many ways, so it's finding what works for the individual.
So thank you to our plant.
Thank you
for the beautiful music that you've been sharing with us, and
thank you.
And I really want to say a thank you for like how you're skillfully weaving quite a lot of complex science and information into something that's very physical and experiential, and that's a really wonderful skill that we definitely need more of.
I think that's what we can all try and do, that a little bit in our lives, of just the play and the experience of it. That really brings something to life, and it really kind of allows us to embody those sort of higher vibrations in a complete way. So yeah, I'll get out and do more of that.
So we had a boat go past at the beginning, and then we've just had a boat go past at the end.
Yeah.
So the little ways that nature and our outside world communicates with us, they're there all the time if we pay attention.
Yeah, and it's interesting when sometimes I'll go out to pick or work with a particular plant, and then you cannot find that plant anywhere, but instead there'll be another plant that's just everywhere right in your face, and then you realize that, oh, this is the medicine I need to work with, this is coming up for this reason. So the more that we open ourselves up to receive, the more we have these synchronicities, and the more we have those signs, those messages that come through, and we can live more in that kind of synchronicities, that sort of symbiosis.
Beautiful. So your website is mamaxanadu.com, is it?
Yes, Mama, M-A-M-A, and then Xanadu, X-A-N-A-D-U. And this is Xanadu, the boat, which is how it all came about.
Brilliant. And we'll share links to everything and to your upcoming book, which we can all look forward to as well. Thank you.
Sacred geometry. Thank you.
thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?